Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my very first reading wrap up of 2023. Today's video is going to be my January reading wrap up. It's officially my second year making these videos and I love doing it, so I'm excited to chat with you guys about all of the books I read this month. I had a really weird reading month this month. I feel like I started the month off really slow with a lot of DNFs and I just felt like I was in such a reading slump for like the first third of the month probably. And then I just like got right back on track and I ended up reading like 15 books this month, I think. 14 or 15, but like I said, I had a ton of DNFs, which I have been really bad about DNFing books in the past. I'm trying to break that habit. And if I'm really not liking a book, I'm trying to just like let it go and pick up something else instead so that I'm not like wasting my time reading books I don't like. That being said, I am going to talk a little bit about the books that I didn't finish this month because there were a few and I did get pretty far into them. In the past, when I don't finish a book, I don't include them in my reading wrap-ups, but I am going to actually include them and just talk about them, talk about like why I didn't want to keep going. The first book I finished this month was The Night Shift by Alex Finley. I did listen to this one as an audiobook. On Goodreads, I rated this one 4 out of 5 and I remember being impressed with it as a thriller and like I thought that it was good, but now barely a month later, I really can't remember that much about it. This is about like crime that happens in 1999, so you're getting like past and present. So in the past, there was a murder during the night shift of this, I'm pretty sure it was a Blockbuster. Everybody at this Blockbuster location were murdered except for one person who survived the attack. And then it jumps forward 15 years and there's another crime that looks eerily similar to this one. So you're getting the point of view of like the survivor from the first one, the detective who is like trying to solve the case, and like a few other people also. Overall, I remember it being good. I guess I'll stand by my rating of 4 out of 5, maybe like a 3 to 4 out of 5. After that, I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I also listened to this one as an audiobook. This one is about two friends, Sadie and Sam, who meet each other in the hospital when they're like really young, and then they end up reconnecting again in college, and they are both like video game producers. What's the word for that? You basically just follow these two friends over the course of like a really long time and their friendship and their ups and downs of their friendship. It's one of those stories where it's kind of like slice of life and there's not really like a ton of plot necessarily, but it's like very character driven. It was good. It was also really frustrating, like because they were just like such realistic people that they were frustrating and they didn't always make the decisions that you wanted them to. I feel like I liked it, but it wasn't like so amazing. It's kind of one of those books that I'll just like never really think about again, but I did enjoy it while I was reading it and it was nice to do something a little different. Right after I finished it, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Then I had my first DNF of the month, which was Meet Me Halfway, and I got really far into this book. I probably got like 60-ish% of the way through this book, but you know when you're reading a book and you just do not care at all and like it almost feels like a chore to read? That's how I felt. Like I just did not want to finish it. Like I didn't want to read it. This one is about a single mom who is like struggling super hard to support herself and her son. She ends up moving into like a townhouse. It's her romance between her and her super grumpy next door neighbor who is so rude to her for so much of the book. So rude to her and like makes all these awful comments to her about how she's just like living off of government assistance and like she's lazy and doesn't work because he like doesn't know that she works 4 jobs or whatever. He's just like making assumptions about her and he's like saying that all to her face, and yet you're like supposed to like fall in love with this guy and like be okay with the romance. Like it just didn't work for me. Like if somebody's saying that shit to you, you don't start dating them. Anyway, I read a ton of it and I just did not care to finish it. So followed up by another DNF, which was From Blood and Ash. This is a fantasy book and I have heard such crazy mixed reviews, and maybe I was just going through such a slump with these two books, but like I just did not want to pick this book up and I did not care at all. I like didn't care to see what happened. This book is really long and I got to 20% and I think that was like 170 pages and I just still didn't care about anything or anyone, and so I was like, I'm just gonna let this one go. But I do think I might actually try this one on audio. I'm waiting for it to become available on my Scribd app and then I might give it a second chance because I am curious about it still, but I just could not get myself to read it, so I DNF'd that one. Then I listened to House Rules by Jodi Picoult. This is a literary fiction book but with like a little bit of mystery, and the whole plot sounded so interesting to me. It's about a young man with autism. I think he's like freshly 18. He's still lives at home with his mom and his brother, and he is like super hyper fixated on forensic investigation and like criminal minds and like that type of thing. And then someone they know ends up being murdered, and there's this open investigation, and he ends up being arrested for it even though he didn't do it. And so there's this whole investigation, and he is like trying to tell everybody that he is innocent, but he is like super bad at communicating with his autism. So I felt like the plot of that was so interesting, and it was. I did enjoy listening to it, and I was so curious the whole time. It was super long though, and really repetitive. It was a little predictable, but I enjoyed most of it except the ending. The ending was so bad and so frustrating, and you got like absolutely no closure whatsoever, which is so annoying when books do that, especially when they're like this long and make you so invested. So I only gave that one a 2 out of 5 because the ending was just so frustrating. I was like, how could you? Then I read In a Jam. This is on Kindle Unlimited. This is a story about a girl whose grandmother passes away and ends up leaving her like house and farm. She owns like a tulip farm in the town that she grew up in, but there's like a few conditions in the will, and one of them is that she has to live in the town for like a year or something, and she has to be married. She has to do both of those things in order to inherit the house. So she ends up having like a marriage of convenience with this boy that she grew up with and like went to high school with, but then you find out that he's actually been in love with her since high school. Like she was the one that got away from him. He's always been like super obsessed with her. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. It was really cute. It had some good spice to it, but it was kind of boring. It was definitely too long. It didn't need to be that long, and it was just a little bit boring. But the like main male character in this book was fantastic. I loved him, and it had like really cute small town vibes. Overall, it was good. I would recommend it, but it is a little slow. Then I got into the Edens series, which I've had on my TBR forever. I read the first 2 in the series, and they were both so good. I was really impressed by these, and it felt like finally reading a good book again after being in a slump and like reading not good books for so long. I was like, thank you. There are good books left out there in the world. So the first one in the series is Indigo Ridge. This is about a girl named Winslow who ends up moving to the like small town that her parents grew up in Montana, because she was just hired to be the chief of police. She's like 29 or 30 and is a girl. And so she gets to this small town police department, and they are all really hard on her. Like she's having a really hard time settling into this community because it's really small and not everybody is very welcoming of her. And her very first night in the town, she ends up sleeping with one of the like local men in the town. She doesn't know that he's a local. She thought that he was just like passing through, and then it turns out that he is like one of the most like well-known people in this town, and she ends up having to like work with him a lot. So it's like their romance, but also the whole time there is like an investigation going on, and there's like an underlying mystery story mixed in with the romance, which was such a good combo, because the whole time she's like trying to solve this like really weird investigation. I feel like I was almost more interested in what was going on with that crime and like her like trying to like solve this thing than I was with the romance. But the romance was good too. It's got all of the charming small town vibes, lots of hot cowboy vibes. Overall, it was really good. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. And I read the next one also, which is Juniper Hill. I see so many people saying that they like the second one better than the first one. I gave them both 4.5. This one is about the first guy's brother. As a favor to his sister, he lets this girl rent out his studio apartment that he has over his garage to a girl who is moving to the town and couldn't find any place to rent. And that girl is Memphis, and she is basically running away from all of her problems in New York City to Montana to take a job in this town. It's her and her tiny newborn baby. Naturally, that baby is up crying all night long, which is keeping her up, and it's keeping Knox up. He ends up going up there to try to help her with her baby. Obviously, romance ensues. It was very cute. There was just enough like drama and tea going on in this one to keep things really interesting too. I'm curious to see how the rest of the series is. I'm honestly embarrassed to talk about these next 2. I really didn't think I was ever gonna read these, but here I am. I started the Planet Barbarians series. I read the first 2 this month, and they're so different than I was expecting. These books are super smutty. They're so close to just being like not even books and just being smut, but there is just enough plot and just enough story and everything that it's not just full-blown smut, but it's close. Anyway, this is about a group of girls who get abducted by aliens. Literally little green men aliens is how they're described in the beginning. So I think there's like 11 or 12 girls who all get kidnapped and they are all on a spaceship with aliens. It sounds so stupid, and it is. These alien men or whatever are basically trying to like sell these human women as like cattle to who knows, but they end up having issues with their spaceship and have to like drop their cargo to go fix their spaceship, and they drop it on this strange ice planet. So here's all these super scared girls who are really cold because they all got kidnapped in their pajamas on this super snowy ice planet. And one of them, Georgie, she is like brave and goes out to go and like find help and food and everything, or to like figure out where they are. So she goes wandering on the ice planet and finds a big blue alien man. This alien guy she finds is 7 feet tall. He's blue, he speaks some random language that she doesn't know. Oh, and he purrs like a cat also. I think it says on the front of the book that these are science fiction romance. They're honestly so funny and so ridiculous and so stupid, but like I loved it. The plot and the story are interesting enough. The spice is surprisingly great because it's literally aliens, but like, tell me why it's so good though. I was like giggling and giddy reading this. It was just good. I was like, it feels like there's crack in this book. Like I just wanted to keep going. So yeah, I loved it. I rated the first one 4 out of 5 because I was like, that was a really good time. There's literally 21 books in the series, which is insane, but like I kind of get it. I read the second one in the series this month also, which is called Barbarian Alien. It's literally just another pairing. It's another girl and another blue alien. So it's just like the same thing as the first one, but like different people, but still so good. I didn't really like either of these main characters as much as the first two, but the spice was still great, and there was just like enough story and drama to make this one interesting. Also, I only give this one a 2 out of 5 because it just feels wrong to rate them any higher than that. I did another audio thriller. I read The Villa. I feel like it takes a lot for a thriller to like impress me almost, which sounds dumb because I feel like they're so much more complex than like a romance novel, but I just don't ever get that like super excited like 5-star feeling with thrillers. I don't know. The Villa was interesting. It was a little hard to get into at the beginning because you are following a few like timelines at the same time, and it takes a bit to like get into and to like figure out what's going on. So in this one you have like the past and the present, and they're both happening in this villa in Italy. So in the present you have this girl and her friend, and they're both authors, and they are spending the summer in Italy in this villa, both writing their own separate books. And then you also have a past perspective, which also happened in that villa. This is in the 70s. In that timeline you have this girl and her sister and her boyfriend, and they're all also staying for the summer in this villa. That girl was an author, so she's writing a book in the 70s while they are there. And you're also getting the book that she's writing too. So that's why you kind of have a lot to like keep track of, and it was very confusing at the beginning. In the current timeline with her and her friend, there is like so much friend drama, which is something I love in books. Two friends fighting and like mean girl stuff like that. I don't know why, I just like eat that up in books, and this one had that and I loved it. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. It was really good. Okay, then I finished one of my least favorite books that I have read in so long. I read this book off of the recommendation of a girl here on YouTube who I love. She was raving about this book and raving about like the ending and how much she was crying and just how much she like loved this book. It's called Where the Mountains Meet the Sea. I literally started this book I think in December. I hated it from the beginning. It gave me the ick so bad. I never wanted to pick it up, but like I just couldn't DNF it, you know? And so like every now and then I would try to like read a few chapters, just try to get through it. I was like, come on, it's gotta be good. I just kept going though because the girl that I recommended it, she just kept going on and on about the ending. And I was like, I gotta know what happens at the end. I was reading reviews, trying to figure out what happens at the end so that I could just know. But I couldn't find anybody spoiling it, which is so annoying. I think probably like the last 25% of the book I was just skimming. This is like a right person, wrong time, like childhood friends to lovers story where you are following Roman and Luna ever since they're like 6 and 7 years old up until they're in like their 20s. It starts out when these characters are literally 6 and 7 years old. It's written in the first person, which I normally like, but I think that this book would have been a lot better if they had like written this part in the third person instead, because this is something I hate so much in books. It's when an author will like assign child characters like super mature dialogue and internal thoughts, and I'm just like, have you ever met like a 6-year-old ever? Like, to make this like 6 and 7-year-old like act like they love each other, like have these like super mature thoughts about each other, not like in an inappropriate way, but just like 6-year-olds thinking that they're soulmates and like that they're gonna be together when they're older. Like, it's just so unrealistic and cringy, like super cringy. It just feels wrong. And so literally like the first 20% of the book is them when they are children, like from 6 to 7 until like middle school age. Ugh, hated that. And then the second part of the book is when they are in high school, which is a little bit better because they are older, but they're still high school age, and that's when they start like being in a relationship and being like sexually active with each other, which is like detailed in the book, like all of these smutty scenes. And like, I know it's fiction, but the characters are literally like 14, 15, like freshmen in high school, and like I don't want to read about that. It just feels so gross and so wrong, which maybe that's just me. I feel like I had to skim like all of the childhood part and then all of the high school part because it was so icky. Then after high school, they end up going their separate ways. Life takes them their separate ways. They both do horrible things on their own, and then they come back together. Spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you what happens in the end since nobody would ever tell me, so if you don't want it spoiled, skip ahead. In the end, when they finally come back together, when they've been apart for absolutely no reason but miscommunication, they finally get back together. He proposes to her. He's a firefighter in New York. She's finally gonna go and be a ballerina that she's always wanted to be her whole life. And then he dies in 9/11. As soon as they were like, he's a firefighter, and like it was 2001, I was like, okay. And she's horrified. So she jumps off a cliff and unalives herself. I absolutely hated it. I gave it a 1 out of 5. I wish I could give it less. Then I listened to another audiobook. I listened to The Golden Couple. This one was really good. This is probably my favorite thriller I've read in a long time. It's about a couple who are going to this like counselor therapist to try to help them with their marriage, because she cheated on her husband, but they are trying to like work it out. And so they are seeing this therapist, I think her name was Avery, who actually like very recently had her like therapist license revoked because she has these like really outlandish therapy techniques. People swear by them. So she just like is technically, I think, like a consultant or something, because she's not legally allowed to be a therapist because her methods are so like inappropriate. So they are going to her. You're getting her perspective, the therapist, and then also the wife and like a few others also. I really liked this one. It's just like a good domestic thriller. Lots of like drama between all of the characters. It had just enough stuff going on to like really keep me guessing. I didn't know who to be suspicious of or like what was gonna happen, and yeah, it really kept me guessing all the way until the end. I felt like the plot twists were good. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5. Then I listened to another thriller audiobook. I love to do thrillers on audio. The Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. And I think that I was just like in a funky mood when I was listening to this, because it was a good thriller and the twists were good, but I just couldn't get into it for some reason. I guess I'm just trying to say that I didn't like it, but it like wasn't the book's fault, if you know what I mean. So this is about a like teenage girl who has been seeing this therapist for like the last 3 years. She kind of like graduates from therapy, but she is like a little, I don't want to say obsessed, but kind of like a little obsessed with him. And so she starts following him around everywhere he goes. She just becomes kind of like infatuated with watching him and his family, but then she goes missing and there's a whole investigation, and you get a bunch of different perspectives in this one too. Like I said, it was good. I just like couldn't get super into it, but I did think that it was a good thriller. Then I read Lotus by Jennifer Hartman. This is my third Jennifer Hartman book that I have read, and I am not gonna read anymore. I've just realized that her writing does not work for me at all. I talked about this with her other book, Still Beating, and then this one also. I feel like the plot and the story and the ideas of these books were so good and had so much potential, but the way she did them is just so bad. And she writes these really crude and unlikable characters who say really dumb things, which makes like the whole reading experience just so frustrating. It's about these next door neighbors, like childhood best friends. So Sydney and Oliver, they live next door to each other. They're like best friends when they are like 6 and 7 years old. And then Oliver gets kidnapped and goes missing. And he is missing for 20 years, 20 or 22. So like from when he's 7 years old until he's like a 30-year-old man. But then obviously he's found. He escapes his kidnapping. He goes back to his regular life, even though like pretty much all he has ever known is like living in the captivity that he was kept in. You're following like figuring out what happened to him, why he was kidnapped, where he was, his healing from that. You know, like he's never really interacted with any other people in the last 20 years since he was 7 years old. So he's got to like figure out how to be an adult man. And then naturally he falls back in love with his childhood best friend who lived next door. I felt like that could have been so good, but it was just so not. And like I was talking about with that other book, it does the thing where it assigns these super mature adult feelings and dialogue to children characters where it just doesn't make any sense. You know, like 7-year-olds are not talking about how they're soulmates and having these like insane adult like connections, you know? And so like there's so much of that in this book. And in another Jennifer Hartman book that I actually didn't finish, I think it was called like June 1st or something, like same thing. She tends to write these books about children being in love, which is just, it's so cringy. So this book had a lot of that, which I just hate, and it makes books so icky to me. I did end up giving this one 2 out of 5. I was only gonna give it 1, but I gave it 2 because the twists at the end were really good. And like I said, like the story and the idea and the plot was like such a good idea that I just gave it 2 instead of 1, but I still wouldn't recommend it. I'm not gonna read any more books by this author. It's just not for me. The very last book I read this month, I actually just finished it this morning, another audiobook. This was Never Lie by Frida McFadden. Super fast paced, super interesting. I really liked the first book I read by her. I think it was called The Locked Door. This one I liked too, but it has a trope in it that I just hate in thrillers so much, which I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it if you do want to read this one. But even without that, I felt like this was a super interesting, really fast-paced thriller, and it did have a lot of good twists and turns. So I still recommend it. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Okay, those are all of the books that I read this month. If you have read any of these, leave your thoughts on them in the comments so we can chat about it. Or if you have any books that you think I should add to my TBR, leave them in the comments also. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram, and I will see you guys all in my next video.